Greetings humanoids, I'm the Bog Witch Myst Matty and welcome to the Lucard Arts YouTube channel. Down this particular rabbit hole we're going to be learning about conch piercings, which is this section of the ear over here. I'll show you, I've got a pretty picture for you guys. And helix piercings, which is this piece of the ear over here. But don't worry, I've got another little pretty picture for you guys. First, the terms and conditions. 1, I'm not a medical practitioner. 2, none of the contents of this video is medical advice. 3, this material is not to be used as a training guide in any way. And 4, consult a medical practitioner before you have a piercing done. Right, so in this section of the video we're going to be looking at conch piercing. Now, as you can see on this side of the screen, that's a conch in its natural habitat. The conch is a structure of the ear that kind of supports it and helps bounce sound into your eardrum. So the cartilage in the area is a little bit thicker than other parts of the ear because it's got a job to do, right? However, the conch is just skin and cartilage. And so while it is a bit thicker than the other cartilage in the ear, cartilage does not have pain receptors of its own. So when people say that the conch piercing hurts, what they're referring to is just the amount of pressure it takes to get a needle through the thickness of the cartilage, which is uncomfortable. It does make the pain a bit more sudden. But yeah, that is the conch piercing. Now, the placement of the conch is common along what's called the outer conch ridge, which is pretty much I figured this out, it's the anterior purple edge of the purple line, right? So the piece of the purple line closest to me, that is the conch ridge, and the conch piercing is normally done through that section of cartilage. Healing time on a conch piercing is around about 12 weeks, and it's important that you look after the piercing for the entire duration of that time. The reason for this is so that you can make sure that that scar tissue channel on the inside matures properly without any problems, and you know there won't be any problems if you're constantly looking after it for those 12 weeks, right? You'll notice if something is going wrong a lot sooner. However, it is generally okay to change jewelry after 8 weeks. However, if you want to put a ring in there, you are going to want to wait the full 12. Speaking of jewelry, the jewelry that you want for the initial piercing is going to be 316L surgical steel or titaniums, and you're going to want a straight barbell in them, right? The reason for this is because a straight wound with a straight piece of metal in it heals a lot quicker than a straight wound with a curved piece of metal, right? The curve puts more pressure on, which makes the piercing more uncomfortable. So you want to have a straight barbell through there, and obviously you want the barbell to have enough space on it to accommodate for your body's natural swelling, right? And then after the 8 weeks of healing, the 8 weeks mark, you can shorten it down to a slightly more snug 316L surgical steel piece of jewelry or a titanium barbell. You could also even change it to a libret stud if you wanted a flat back, but just make sure there's enough space on there to accommodate the swelling. And then after 12 weeks, once the piercing's completely healed, you can put a surgical steel or titanium libret in there, barbell in there, a ring on there if you want. You can start to get creative with your jewelry choices and show off your flair, but that's only because the piercing channel has matured properly. So long term with this piercing, the first thing is if you take the jewelry out and the piercing's fully healed, the skin in the area will shrink down and clog with sebum, which is your body's natural skin oils. If the piercing is injured and you take the jewelry out, what will happen is the scar tissue on the inside of that channel will fuse itself shut, which means that you'll have a visible scar in the place of the piercing, and that piercing will be completely closed, so you won't be able to get any jewelry in there. The extent of the scar will all depend on your body and how prone you are to scarring and keloiding. But for the most part, if it does leave an undesirable scar, you can apply tissue oil to the area because this will help break down the scar tissue. That is all that I can teach you and tell you about what you need to know on a conch piercing. So in this section, we are going to be talking about helix piercings. This over here is a helix in its natural habitat. So pretty much a helix is this outer fold of your ear, and there are two ways that you can do this. You can either do this along the ridge like this, which is the anterior purple line, so along the purple line closest to me, or we can do it perpendicular through the ridge itself, which on your diagram is the posterior, the outer line, right? So those are your two placements that you have for your helix piercing. Now, helix piercings go through a section of the body that is made up of skin and cartilage. This generally has a tendency of being towards the thinner end of the cartilage in the ear. And the reason for this is because it isn't really a structure that supports the weight of the ear. However, the curve is just to help channel sound better into the eardrum. So, as I said in previous videos or in the previous section, there are no pain receivers in cartilage. However, what makes this piercing more on the uncomfortable side is that it's a piece of ear that's constantly folding and constantly moving. And so this movement creates pressure on the piercing, which is what causes the discomfort during the healing time. The more you can limit the amount of movement in the area, the less discomfort you'll experience, which is a good thing. So in terms of placement, like I said, we can either do it along this ridge here or perpendicularly so that the piece of jewelry would come out in this area that I'm touching like this. Healing time for the piercing, you are looking at 12 weeks for the piercing to be completely healed and completely matured. And you can generally change the jewelry after the 8-week mark. All right. In terms of jewelry, you are going to want this initially to be pierced with 316L surgical steel or with titanium. You can either use a libret stud or you can use a straight barbell, as long as the length of jewelry is enough to accommodate your body's natural swelling. The reason, again, why we're using a straight piece of jewelry in the initial healing is because we've got a straight wound with a straight object in it, so the object doesn't place any undue pressure on the piercing. Whereas curved places pressure, so it takes longer to heal. And then once it's healed at the 8-week mark, when it is time to change jewelry, you can change it to either a libret stud or a straight barbell. You can even start considering to change it to a nice little tight ring or hoop if you so wish. Okay, so the long term on this one. So if the piercing's fully healed and you take the jewelry out, the skin in the area will shrink down and clog with sebum, which means that the piercing will still be there, you just won't be able to get any jewelry into it yourself. If it's injured and it comes out, then there will be a scar that forms and you won't be able to get any jewelry in there at all, because the scar, the fissure, the skin, the scar channel on the inside there will seal itself closed. How big that scar is all depends on whether you are prone to keloiding or not. Now, at this point, I'm going to talk about why it's better to do this piercing with a needle than with a gun. And the reason I need to do this is because we need to discuss one of the long-term effects of these piercings, which is the possibility of ear collapse. So ear collapse is where the section of cartilage that the piercing goes through becomes exceptionally brittle and falls in on itself. Now, this happens as mostly a result of second-degree trauma to the area, so damage that happens after you've had the piercing done. Now, when you do these piercings with a piercing gun, you increase the risk of damaging that cartilage structurally, okay, because you're not using a sharp needle but a blunt object to force the jewelry through. You can shatter the cartilage in the ear. And if that shattered cartilage does not mend itself, it can cause your ear to collapse. Now, this is scary. I know this only happens in the situation where you've had the piercing done with a gun. So if you have the piercing done at a professional studio and the artist uses a needle, you don't have any risk of your ear collapsing on you because you haven't done any damage to the surrounding cartilage. And that is all I have to say on this. And that is the end of this particular rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the journey, please boop the like button, clump subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you know when the next video is coming out. Have pleasant misadventures, and remember, kindness is punk.